Hello, my name is Matthew, and for our Voltaire Tuesdays, I read Micromegas by Voltaire, and it's the title story of this great little book. It's Micromegas and Other Stories by Voltaire, translated by Douglas Parme. And for some reason, I thought Micromegas was a much longer story than it is. I thought maybe it was 100 pages. It's like 20, maybe a little bit over 20 pages. And it's a science fiction story, pure science fiction. We have this character, Micromegas, who is an inhabitant of the star Sirius. And so he lives with all the people that live on Sirius. And he's a giant, 20,000 feet tall, 100,000 feet tall. I can't remember the specifics, but he's this huge person to our standards. He would be sticking out above the clouds. And we have our mathematicians, because Voltaire is talking to us, poking fun at everybody about how, well, logically, that would make sense because the star Sirius is this gigantic star, and so the people that would live on it would have to be proportionately gigantic. And so, of course, that makes perfectly good sense, and you can see Voltaire just kind of snickering. And so Micromegas decides, he was actually banished for some reason. He gets banished from Sirius and decides to go traveling. And so he's going to travel the universe and decides to hop and skip along planet to planet, star to star, hopping on comets and asteroids until he lands on Saturn. And Saturn is inhabited by the Saturnians or something. And they're gigantic too, but they are, again, proportionately sized to the planet. And so Micromegas, the inhabitant of Sirius, is 100,000 feet tall, and the Saturnalian from Saturn is only 20,000 feet tall. So we have a giant and a dwarf, and they have philosophical conversations that are just a riot. It's a hoot to listen to these two talk. Micromegas says, well, we live for 100,000 years, and the Saturnalian will say, well, we only live for 20,000 years, and they come to the same conclusion that life is short. Whether you live for 100 years, 10,000 years, 20,000 years, when you get to the very end, it all goes by in a blink of an eye. And they say, well, how many elements do you have? And they'll go, well, we have 72 or 700 elements on Saturn, and the Syrian Micromegas says we have 3,000 elements, and how many senses do you have? And they say, well, we have 300 senses, and the other one has 3,000 senses. And just a really great play on some of the silly notions that we take very seriously, or the very concrete notions, the things that we know are definitely true that maybe are not, or could look very different when you look at them in a different way. And it's all framed in this fantastical story. So they decide to go on a trip together. So the giant and the dwarf, the giant being Micromegas and the dwarf being the Saturnalian, they're going to go on a trip together. And there's a moment where the Saturnalian's mistress comes out and yells at him for basically leaving the house. It's like we just started going out, and now you're going off with this giant. It's great. But they hop over to Jupiter, skip along until they finally get onto this little lump of mud called Earth. And they're there. They've brought like a carriage with them. There's other attendants, and the giant Micromegas from Sirius has his head above the clouds, just truly astronomically gigantic, and the Saturnalian is still just a giant, and they're having mountains for lunch, and looking at this planet, seeing the oceans, and having funny things to say about this teeny tiny, minuscule, insignificant little planet that they think is a barren wasteland, a lifeless world. Thinking what could possibly even live on a teeny tiny little world like this? And Micromegas, who is bigger and older and wiser, is saying to the Saturnalian, "Well, don't just look by preconceptions or just what you see on first glance. We've just been talking about how very different our perceptions of the world and universe have been in these conversations." And they finally pick up a whale, and one of them has a whale on his fingernail. And the both of them are looking at this teeny tiny little thing, going, could it be alive? Could it have its own little soul? Then they come across a ship, and they pick up the ship, and it's a ship full of philosophers. And using a piece of diamond, they're able to fashion a microscope so they can look at these ant-like little creatures, these humans. And they're looking at them, and they're seeing, because now the little ship's like in the palm of the giant's hand, and they're scurrying around. These little humans are scurrying around, dropping the anchor into the palm, and doing all these little things. They're watching them, like, look at these little humans. They don't know what they are, and they fashion a way of communicating. So somehow, the minuscule little atoms of people are able to communicate with giants. You just have to accept that. And the philosophers, the human philosophers, start kind of impressing the dwarf and the giant, saying to the dwarf, "Well, I can tell that you are 30,000 feet tall." He goes, "Oh my God, like he got it right by the foot, like this tiny little thing." Then he measures the giant, Micromegas. He goes, "Well, you're 100,000 feet tall." He goes, "Oh my gosh, like these little things like know their stuff. Like how is it possible?" Like they're like really happy with them, and they're having this really interesting conversation. And they have a variety of topics, mathematics, or history, or the natural sciences, astronomy. They're able to see the stars and the planets and all those kinds of things. And then they get to the topic of religion. And there's a theologian on the ship. And so the theologian explains to Micromegas, the giant, and the Saturnalian, the dwarf, that all of creation, the Earth, the solar system, the galaxy, all of the planets, all of the stars, the whole universe was created for humans. The universe revolves around us. And so they're holding them, and they have a laugh. They just laugh at them. And Micromegas says, "I'm going to write you a book. I'm going to write a book that will explain the true nature of the universe." So off they go. Micromegas and the Saturnalian, they leave, and finally we have this moment where there's going to be the reveal, or the ironic turn at the very end of the book. And so these little teeny tiny human atoms. Open up the book to see what this impressive giant has to say, and it's a blank book. And he goes, well, that's just as I expected. The meaning of life, blank pages. It's great. So yeah, that's Micromegas by Voltaire. One of his. It's a really well done science fiction story. It's well plotted. It has there's philosophical conversations done in a really interesting done from a really interesting perspective. It's incredible how well the humor still lands, and it's a good story. It's a very well-rounded Voltaire story. So that's it. That's what I have to say. So thank you for watching. Leave a comment if you would like, and take care.